This is going to be the first of a series of sessions, hopefully depending on what the feedback's like. A very quick intro about 100ms. 100ms is a live interactive audio video SDK provider, more commonly known as a CPaaS provider. What we essentially do is we enable our partners to go live and try and build custom audio rooms on top of their gaming apps, or custom online classrooms, virtual events, video conferencing, and more relevant to this session is custom audio rooms. We are a fairly young company. We are 8 months old right now, but we already do several million minutes a month with a bunch of fantastic partners who've gone live across all of these verticals. Right? While the company is young, what I'm super excited to bring to you guys, and this is something I've been personally privy to for a long time, is this host of speakers who are some of the best people to explain how video engineering works. So Kshitij, who's the CEO and co-founder of 100ms, has been in video audio engineering live for about 20 years now. Started off by writing code for chips that used to run videos for early old Nokia phones, and in Texas Instruments, landed up in a couple of early stage startups that optimized video for 3G networks, old iPhones. I'm pretty sure that there's a few people here who don't remember a world before iPhones, and he's been doing this for a while now. He landed up at Facebook, where he was part of the early Facebook live video team, ended up building that and scaling that for the next couple of years, and then joined Disney Plus Hotstar. For those of you who don't know what Hotstar is, and since all of us, Kshitij, Sarvesh, Sagar, met at Hotstar and we helped build Hotstar. Hotstar is the largest OTT platform in India. Think of it as India's Netflix, Hulu, ESPN Plus, all combined into a single entity. So not only does it do live shows and videos, it does live sports at a massive scale, right? So to give you some context, Hotstar held the world record for the most number of people watching a single live concurrent stream, with just 25 million people watching. To place it in context, YouTube tried to stream the FIFA World Cup finals and they crashed at about 2 million odd concurrent people. Hotstar does 25 million people day in, day out. This was largely Kshitij's team and Sarvesh and Sagar and a bunch of other super smart folks who managed to build this. Kshitij is not only a fantastic engineer who's scaled video systems for a long time, he's also one of the best people to explain and deconstruct video into terms that are very accessible. And even if you're an engineer who's just looking to enter, or if you're a CTO who's looking to scale, he always has the right abstraction level or a way of explaining that I'm super excited to now bring to the world via these sessions. Sarvesh and Sagar are our leads at 100ms, leading the backend infra team and the video infra team. They were core members of the Hotstar team that built out the video processing platform, the video architecture. Sarvesh has been a part of video engineering teams for now about a decade. Sagar has been doing this for another decade. Sagar was also a part of Ithium. Ithium, if you guys don't know, is who the experts call when they run out of ideas. So Ithium helps solve video problems for Netflix, Google, Android. So there's a lot of video horsepower in this room, and super excited. I've gone through the deck. I'm biased, but I've gone through the deck, but it's a super interesting deck, which will start off at a very top level, trying to figure out. So even if you're a CEO, CTO, VP, who's just trying to figure out whether, hey, I want to add audio rooms to my app. I'm presuming there's some product manager in LinkedIn who's been given this task already. And or if you're thinking of building this in-house, whether you should build or buy, if you're an EM or architect who already has some system in place, what are the constraints in scaling? How do I think about these issues? Or anybody who's just generally curious, welcome. This is just consider this as an introduction to live audio video engineering. I won't take too much of your time. Super excited. Over to you, Kshitij.
Thank you, Aniket. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good evening. So I'll let me just share my screen and get started. Give me a moment. I hope everybody can see my screen. Aniket, can you give me a thumbs up? All right.
Yes,
So
Ritesh, with us.
thank you. Let's get started, guys. So Clubhouse, I mean, very exciting app, and we want to do some. I mean, we'll not be able to do a full justice, but we will try to deconstruct it as much as possible. So this is a three-part kind of. Not, I would say that this is. We will be doing this talk in three parts basically, right? Like I'll be speaking for around 20 minutes, and then Sarvesh for 10 minutes, and then Sagar for 10 minutes. And the way we have structured this is that in the first 20 minutes, I'll be talking about the architecture, like about the right choices in the stack and whatnot. Then Sarvesh will be talking about life of an audio packet, and this is very, very interesting. I mean, every time we need to understand an architecture, right? The diagrams do some justice, but when you actually see the flow, that's when you kind of start enjoying that architecture. And then Sagar will actually get into the nuts and bolts of it, for which you have actually come here. That how, okay, you have given us all the architecture, the everything. Tell us something about how do we actually build it. So Sagar will cover that part. We want to keep this very, very interactive, guys. Like feel free to keep asking on the chat. And Aniket, I mean, if there is something we want to interrupt, do interrupt me, and then I'll stop and explain the concept again if required. All right. So while building any live media tech or media, any architecture in the live media, I would say these three key tenets have to be kept in mind always, right? So be it at Hotstar, at Facebook, this is what I've learned, that it's a balance of these three things almost always. First is the latency. Latency is the kind of the time from the presenter to the viewer. Then the scale. At what scale are you planning to do this? Is it a conference call between 4 people, or is it a webinar right now around 100 people, or are you going to kind of show it live to like millions of people? And obviously, cost is also a key parameter, right? So we'll keep coming back to these tenets again and again while we deep dive into the architecture. So this is the description which Clubhouse kind of gives on their website or the app. I want to kind of see the green words which are highlighted here. Voice, talk, listen, real time, right? So Clubhouse is an amazing app. It has a very amazing onboarding, and it has like a cool feed and whatnot. Today we will be concentrating on the words which are listed as green here, right? So how do you talk and listen in real time? Because that is the core. Rest of the things are also super important, but we will leave that to you amazing developers in the room. So I'll just, everybody is familiar how Clubhouse works, but I just still want to give a very basic definition of it. So the fundamental element in a Clubhouse is called a room, and room has two kind of entities. One is called a speaker, and another one is called a listener. And as you're seeing speakers, this very much looks like a kind of a press conference where speakers are kind of or a panel discussion, right? Speakers are talking to each other, able to hear each other in real time, and listeners are also able to hear the speakers in real time. Listeners don't speak, listeners only listen, but they can raise their hand, and speakers can make any one of the listeners a speaker anytime. Like my friend here, one of the listeners actually raised his hand and was made a presenter. So this is like how a Clubhouse works. Now let's pan out and see how this works in the real world or digital world, basically. So this is the real world example, but let's kind of see the equivalent digital world thing. So in the digital world, this is what it looks like. The most important thing is the latency here, right? These two things, the mics are representing the speakers, and the headphone is representing a listener here. The speaker to speaker latency needs to be less than 250 millisecond. I mean, it can be 500 millisecond also, but it has to be less than 250 millisecond for a good experience. Otherwise, that conversation does not remain a conversation. You say something, take a pause, and then somebody responds, and that does not feel natural. For the listeners, again, I mean, it's a drop-in audio chat. Any listener can become a speaker at any time, and hence, ideally, it must be 250 millisecond, but it would still be acceptable at 1 second, and in the worst case, it could be 5 seconds also. And I'll come back to this. Why I'm presenting this 5 second here. Let's go to a little bit of the like your networking class, right? If you remember your networking class in your college, I'm just going back to that. On my right hand side, you have the HTTP and TCP, and a system like Clubhouse, it cannot be built with HTTP and TCP. The problem is that HTTP and TCP does not satisfy that 250 millisecond latency. And why can't it satisfy that 250 millisecond latency? Because it basically makes sure the guaranteed data delivery. And this is super important, guys, by the way. Like, don't get me wrong. HTTP TCP is what the internet is built of. You won't want your email to have a missing character or anything, or you don't want your web page to render with some missing characters, right? So higher latency is probably acceptable, but the guaranteed data delivery is more important. When we come to the left-hand side, however, which is what we want to build, which is like a real-time interaction, and which is what this pandemic has forced all of us to now rethink the internet architecture. This is where the real-time world exists. And so this is the WebRTC and the UDP world, where it offers you low latency, but the bad part is the data can get lost. The data does not come in the ordered fashion. It's basically a fire and forget protocol, UDP. It would be amazing if the gurus of network can come up with a low latency as well as a guaranteed data delivery protocol. But till then, we'll have to live with this WebRTC and UDP. I want to walk through now. Actually, before that, let me also explain a little bit about WebRTC. WebRTC is a suite of protocols. It is not just one protocol. It is a suite of protocols, standards, as well as browser APIs. I mean, it was started by Google 10 years back, and that is why the name is WebRTC, which is like web real time. It is now being used for devices and everything, but the architecture fundamentally only takes care of peer-to-peer. That means it gives you all the definitions between two peers, and these two peers could be anybody. These two peers could be two machines. These two peers could be a server and a phone. These two peers could be anything, right? But it does not take care of anything beyond two peers. Anything beyond two peers is what we're going to be talking here. Yeah, so now let's look at this diagram again, right? So we have 4 speakers here and we have 6 listeners here. Our goal is to send the audio of, let's say, the blue speaker to all the other speakers as well as all the other listeners. And if we use the WebRTC in its purest form, this is what it will look like. That the blue speaker will be sending their audio to each of the person in the room. Similarly, if you see the red one will also be doing the same thing, and these 2 white ones will also be doing the same thing. The listeners will not be sending anything; they will just be receiving. So this is called peer-to-peer routing in WebRTC. The problem, however, in this mechanism is that when the listeners or when the total number of participants grow more than 5, 10, right? Like it goes to 100. Now the problem is that this particular red speaker has to now send this audio to hundreds of listeners. And this being mostly this will be a phone. And if you ask, now you're asking a phone client to send hundreds of audio streams to other devices, that means it is making hundreds of network connections. It is uploading data to these hundreds of network connections. And that is just impractical, folks, right? This This P2P architecture in theory it looks good, but practically this does not work. So this is what WebRTC pundits have come up with. They call it kind of SFU routing, and SFU stands for Selective Forwarding Unit. And you will very soon understand why is it called as a Selective Forwarding Unit. So I'm taking the same diagram. The blue speaker, what it does now, instead of blue speaker sending that audio streams to each and every one, it is sending that data to SFU. And this SFU is then forwarding the data to each of the persons in the room. So this is what a selective forwarding unit architecture looks like. This SFU is in the cloud. So now, since it is in the cloud and we can use a much more powerful machine, this can deal with this kind of sending the data in a much more efficient way than the phone itself, the tiny phone here. Let's compare the load now, right? Like, so earlier we saw in this particular slide, we saw this particular blue, the red speaker is sending it to hundreds of listeners. Now in the SFU architecture, we're only sending one stream. We're only sending one stream to SFU. This guy is still receiving 3 streams of the speakers, but it's basically 104 versus 4. Big difference, right? So this is what SFU architecture kind of does when you have to scale. Just reiterating that P2P cannot scale for more than 4 or 5 people call, but the SFU does. So now let's get into the interesting part, that we have solved the problem in one way by moving the problem from the device to the server. But now we have to scale the server side solutions. So let's talk more about that, guys. This is a very busy slide, but let me try to explain it to you, what I'm trying to represent here. The thing I'm trying to represent here is that once you have a Clubhouse-like app and it gets popular, the popularity measure looks something like this, that you will have, let's say, rooms with up to 100 listeners in the range of 50,000. So what I'm trying to say here is that 50,000 concurrent rooms are running where the number of listeners are less than 100. 5,000 concurrent rooms are running where the number of listeners are from 100 to 1,000. 500 concurrent rooms are running where the number of listeners are in the range of 1,000 to 10,000. And we're calling it like a Super Bowl. Like if you go beyond 10,000 listeners, these are like really, really gigantic rooms, and maybe five of such rooms. And this is just sample data, guys. Like, I mean, I wish you will be much more powerful or much more, you will have much more concurrency than this. So I'm just taking this as a representative number. Converting this to now, what I want to get is this particular row here. And I'll kind of show the calculation how we come to this particular row, that how many servers do we need. So there is one assumption here. I hope everybody of you knows what a CPU core is. So let's say in your MacBook, in your typical MacBook, you have 8 CPU cores. So I'm talking about that one CPU core. So assume that one CPU core can handle 1,000 such streams. And this again is an assumption. It could be as well as 5,000 depending on the optimization you've done. But let's start with this assumption. Take this room now. You have 4 speakers, 100 listeners, 400 SFU streams, and so on. 4 speaker, 1,000 listeners, 4,000, and so on. For this particular one, the number of CPU cores is 4,000 divided by 1,000, which is like 0.4. And remember, we said we had 50,000 concurrent rooms. So 0.4 into 50,000. And this is the number of CPU cores we need, which is like 20,000 CPU cores. And in order to get 20,000 CPU cores, I'm just choosing a 16 core instance, a virtual machine. And hence, I will need like 1250 machines to accommodate this type of rooms. Similar calculations here comes to again to the same number, 1250 16 core instances. For this one, I have marked in red because it is hard to get this kind of machine, guys. Like 40 core machines. Uh, yes, you can get them, but they are much more expensive and much more hard to kind of scale. So, and that is why this 10,000 limit is so important. But for this scenario, we're saying we will need 540 core instances. And let's look at the last one, where we're saying we have, let's say, if we have a room where we have 100,000 listeners, we need a 400 core machine, and that's just not feasible, right? And we'll come to it how to solve this now, but let's first solve for these first three rows. So this is how the allocation, or this is how the scaling will kind of somehow happen. Imagine you have a 10 listener room and it's called room 1. There is a component which is similar to a load balancer. This is not exactly a load balancer, although very similar to a load balancer. What is this SFU allocator is doing is, when it sees that, oh, okay, I have a 10 listener room, let me allocate it to this tier, which is my 16 core tier. And if there is a 100 listener room, this can still fit onto a 16 core. Okay, let me still use this 16 core, right? So the point I'm trying to make is, this is how this the horizontal scalability is done. That you will have n number of machines here, and you will have a system similar to a system which will be kind of doing a load balancing, and depending on the room size which comes in here, you will keep allocating the right SFU to it. There is one trick here though. The trick here is, when a room starts, it need not be 5,000 at the moment it starts, right? When it starts, it could be only 5 people, and it becomes a 5,000 listener room when Mark Zuckerberg joins or Elon Musk joins. So then suddenly you have a problem that, oh, a 10 listener room became a 5,000 listener room. I'm not solving it for today. I will leave it for another session. But scaling up, I mean, this single slide cannot do its justice to scale up. We're just showing you the path, but scaling up is like an entire book basically here, right? Or an entire chapter here, like managing these 2,500 machines. You will need some kind of Kubernetes. You will need auto scaling up and auto scaling down. And what happens when one of the SFU fails? How do you make it highly available, right? Like, I know a bunch of questions must be rising in your mind. We can discuss some of those questions at the end of this session. But just to make this exciting for everybody, I'll move on from this slide. Let's try to answer this more interesting question now. That why can't Clubhouse? And we're just taking Clubhouse for fun, basically. It's for any audio room. Or why is it hard to do the 10K plus room? And the 10K plus room, this was the problem. Remember, we said for a 10K plus room, I mean, I have taken example of 100,000 here, but the number of cores required to do such a room is just not feasible to get such machines. And this is again, I'm showing in that diagram again, that let's say if you have 10,000 listeners, this SFU has to do this much of heavy lifting now. That this SFU will have to be sending. So speakers don't matter, guys, right? Speakers, just from the physics of it, you will not have more than 10, 20 speakers. So speakers don't matter that much. This is what determines the size of your room. So in here, we have two choices, which can be kind of, which can help you solve this problem, right? And this is where, remember, we talked about our latency versus the scale. This is where we will choose that principle that let's choose the latency. Let's have some degradation in the latency, but let's still maintain the scale and the cost also, by the way, right? So choice one here is, can we do a hybrid of live streaming for plus WebRTC? I'm not sure how many of you are aware how live streaming is done. but live streaming is not done on WebRTC. The way live streaming is done is a completely different architecture. They use HTTP and TCP protocols, and primarily done on protocols like HLS and Dash. We'll be covering the HLS and Dash in subsequent slides. But what I'm proposing here is that let's do a hybrid of these two, right? And if you do a hybrid of these two, you can basically, what you can do is you can kind of think of it this way, like what Zoom does, right? Zoom allows you to broadcast a Zoom conference to a YouTube live or a Facebook live. So we are kind of doing a very, very similar thing to that. Just that we will be building that part, instead of sending it to YouTube or Facebook live, build an in-house stack for that, right? So we will discuss this in the subsequent slide. There is another choice also, and the another choice here is that break it down. So this is a single SFU right now. Make it a distributed SFU. So if every SFU can handle 1,000, if you have to handle 10,000, I mean, then break it down. Like send it to 10 SFUs. But if you make it 10 SFUs, that means the architecture becomes super complex. These speakers will have to send it to each of the SFU. I mean, we can discuss it in the question and answer, but this is just another big topic, guys. I've kept it for the next session. Let's come to this choice one, and this is like the favorite slide of this webinar for me, I would say. Think of it as two zones, right? Or to give a better example, I think a good example I can take is think of a auditorium, right? So the speakers are on the stage, some amount of listeners, right? So less than 10,000 listeners can fit in an auditorium, and they are inside the auditorium. But rest of the folks, I mean, this is Elon Musk talking about something. So it is a very popular room. So anybody beyond 10,000 can go outside the room and listen it on a radio or something, right? Because they can't fit inside the auditorium. So this is exactly what we are doing here in the digital world, that you have the speakers, you have the listeners who are directly connected to the SFU, and these guys remain in under 250 millisecond latency. Beyond that, what this SFU does is it forwards the streams of the speakers to a system called Stream Compositor. And what the Stream Compositor now does is it will composite these 4 streams, like mixing. Basically, it will mix these 4 streams, send it over a protocol called RTMP. And RTMP is nothing but it's just a live protocol to carry bits from one point to another point. So it carries this mixed bits to another system, and this another system, what it does is it converts this RTMP to the HLS and Dash, which I was talking about. And from this HLS and Dash, now this is nothing but an HTTP kind of traffic, and this can be handled by regular CDNs. And by the way, this is the right hand side of the stack is what is used by Hotstar, YouTube, Facebook, right? All of the live streaming providers use the right hand side of the stack. So I mean, from here, I mean, this was a very busy slide. We can take questions, but I just want to call out that the next part will be taken by Sarvesh, and he'll be covering the life of an audio packet. But before that, let's take some questions if you guys have some questions.
All right, we have a bunch of questions. Kshitij, a lot of people are already calling you out on, I think, what we've kept for the next slide. But Vishal asks a bunch of questions. The first one is, there was a Twitter space with 22K people. How did they make it work? Which is the first question. And the second is, what happens if we have 100 speakers? Is that managed at the network level or at the application level? These 2 questions first. I think the other questions are linked to this.
Sure. So let me do the first one, Vishal. So Twitter space with 22K people. Vishal, I'm not saying that beyond 10K is not possible. It is possible. And it is possible by 2 ways. One is you keep adding the number of cores on a single machine, right? So Twitter has its own data center, right? Twitter can manage machines with larger number of cores. That is one way. Or the second way is we call it something called a distributed SFU, where the SFU gets split into multiple SFUs, and that is how you solve it.
Maybe we have time for one more question, Kshitij.
Okay.
Is the SFU also merging the streams like the stream compositor?
No, the SFU is not merging the streams. SFU is only forwarding the streams.
All right. There's also a very advanced question because you mentioned TCP and UDP. Someone's asking where is the quick protocol here? Maybe at the end of the discussion, maybe we can come back to it. Thanks for the question. We'll come back to it at the end of the call.
I'll answer it in the fastest way possible. So thank you for asking that, by the way, whoever asked the quick protocol. I mean, that is what I was hinting at, that the ideal way is a reliable UDP, and quick is still not there. We'll talk about it, but quick is still not there. Quick also has higher latencies, and quick, as of now, I have not seen a quick implementation which can be used for a 250 millisecond conference calls.
All right, thanks. We'll guys keep on asking questions. The idea is to keep on interacting. We'll move to the next part of the session, but we'll keep on taking these questions.
I can keep answering in the chat, guys. Like while Sarvesh covers it, I can keep answering things on the chat.
All right, over to you, Sarvesh.
Thanks, Kshitij. Thanks, Aniket. Hey guys, this is Sarvesh, and in the next section, I will be talking about the journey of an audio packet between speakers and listeners. So let me share my screen. Yeah. So guys, keep asking questions related to architecture in the messaging. Meanwhile, I'm covering the journey of the audio packet. So how the journey begins? It begins with, like, let's say there is a speaker 1 and P1 is the audio packet of the speaker 1. So S1 sends this packet to SFU. What SFU does, it forwards the packet to the listener. What is SFU? SFU is also known as selective forwarding unit, and it's basically a smart media routing device. Each publisher sends its stream to SFU, and subscriber received its stream from SFU. Somebody has asked, like, what are the open source implementation of SFU? So basically, right now, there are several open source and proven implementations. Like, one is MediaSoup, another one is Janus WebRTC server, another is Jitsi Video Bridge, and then there is one promising project beyond INSFU, which is completely written in Golang. Then there can be another case, because like network topologies are very complex. So what can happen is, like, let's say there is another speaker S2, and through which direct connectivity with SFU is not possible. To overcome this challenge, we have to install one more component, which is known as turn. And what it does is that it acts as a relay server. So it accepts the packet from S2, which is P2 in this case, and then forwards this to SFU. Then SFU does the same thing as it was doing in case of S1. It forwards the packet P2 to a listener. So if you want to know about any open source implementation, then CoTurn is one of the most popular and open source implementation of Turn. You can get it up and running very quickly. Now, how the journey will look like if both S1 and S2 are present. So you can see from here that, like, S1 sends packet to SFU P1, SFU forwards this packet to listener as well as to the turn, and turn relayed back to the S2. Similarly, S2 will forward the packet P2, turn will relay to SFU, and then SFU will forward it to the listener and S1. Now, as Kshitij has already told about the stream compositor and RTM out, let me cover the packets journey. So until this, like we know about P2 and P1 has reached the listener. Additionally, P2 and P1 can be sent to stream compositor. And what will stream compositor does is like it will mix the packet and will generate single packet, you can say, which is P in this case. And then P will be sent to RTMP out server. And what RTMP stands for is like real-time messaging protocol. It is one of the most popular low latency streaming protocol. And it is getting used in Facebook Live as well as YouTube, right? To do WebRTC to RTMP conversion, there are some libraries, open source libraries available, like FFmpeg or GStreamer. And then there is another way, which is like browser streaming, through which you can convert the WebRTC to RTMP. And RTMP works over the internet and it's reliable also. But the problem with RTMP, it's not very CDN friendly. So we need some solution which can do this at scale. So here comes the another component which converts the output of RTMP T dash to HLS and dash. HLS and dash are basically adaptive live streaming protocol. So adaptive bitrate streaming protocol. HLS stands for HTTP live streaming and dash stands for dynamic adaptive streaming or HTTP. So basically what happens in these cases, like there is a master manifest file and it has the reference to chunks. So RTMP to HLS dash in RTMP to HLS dash basically use segments the media packet to several chunks and then like write it in a manifest file, and then these chunks will be pushed to CDN. And there are some open source implementation available, Nginx RTMP module, which is one of the most popular way to convert the RTMP to HLS and dash. Apart from that, there are some paid solutions like AWS Media Live, Wowza, Mux. The CDNs. CDNs here are like traditional CDNs, HTTP based CDNs, like AWS CloudFront, Akamai, and Fastly. And when the listener knows about the media manifest URL, then they will make request to the CDN, and CDN will then forward the media manifest as well as the media segments to the listeners. So basically, this is the whole journey of the packet from S1, S2 to the two cohort of listeners. One is like in 250 millisecond latency, and one is like in around like 5 seconds of latency. Thanks, guys. Please keep posting the question.
All right, let's just pause here for a bit because there's a deluge of questions. Kshitij, if you can answer some of them, I think a lot of these are directed towards you. So let's take Nikhil M's question. He's asking, how do you handle a failure of a server? How do you move the meetings context into a new server? And what's the latency while people join from different geographies? How do you smartly choose which server geolocation based on the audience? We clearly have some very advanced users here.
Yeah, sure, Nikhil. I'm just reiterating the question. How you handle a failure of a server? How you move the meetings context in a new server? Okay, let's do it part by part, Nikhil. So I kind of partly I did not intentionally cover this part. This is complex, Nikhil. How do you handle a failure of a server? So I mean, I'll give you two answers here. One way to handle the failure of a server is don't handle it at the server. Handle it at the client side of the things. And this is what a lot of TCP systems also do. That you will start getting a 500 or a 5xx error. And when the client retries at that time, you can get connected to another server and it works. So a similar kind of thing can be done here also, that when a server fails, everybody who is on that particular SFU that particular room will fail for everybody. And since everybody has retry logic in their client SDKs, they will do a retry, and the SFU load balancer will now allocate them a new SFU, and they should be able to connect, and it will work, right? So there'll be a glitch for everybody, but it will work, right? So I would say this is a easier solve. If you have to solve it like the HA way, right? That no matter what, right? Even if a server fails, it should just work, right? For that to happen, you have to have a lot of redundancy, Nikhil. I mean, that means that every stream must be available on 2 SFUs. And when you do that every stream is available on 2 SFUs, even if an SFU fails, then you kind of receive it from the another SFU. I would still prefer the first one, because even when a stream fails from first SFU, it's non-trivial to detect that the SFU has failed, because in case of UDP, in case of TCP, the connection breaks. In case of UDP, you don't even know that the sender is not sending the data. All you know is a timeout that I have not received data for the last X seconds, and hence I must assume that the sender is dead and I must move to the another one. So it is, I mean, in my practical experience, the first solution scales better. Let me come to the second question. Latency, while people join from different geography, how smartly you choose the server geolocation based on audience? Thank you for asking this, Nikhil. So this, we deal with this question almost every day. And there is a theoretical answer to it. There is a practical answer to it, right? Practically what we have seen, Nikhil, that it actually does not matter where your SFU is. Even if your SFU is in, the only time it matters where your SFU is when you have something called hairpinning. So imagine, let's say we are in India, me and you are conversing, and me and you are in India, but the SFU is in San Jose. Then it kind of creates a problem. We can still do the conversation. The latency goes slightly higher, but the conversation is still possible. But if I'm in US, you are in India, then whether SFU is in India or US, it does not matter that much, right? Having said that, there are smarter solutions to it. The smarter solution is like what Sarvesh covered, a component called turn server, right? So what you do is that the public internet path is slower, but the cloud internet path is much faster. So what you try to do is you try to terminate each of the user to the closest cloud termination point, right? So if you are in India, you terminate to Mumbai. If I'm in US, I terminate to San Jose, and then from San Jose to Mumbai, that travel time is much faster because it travels on the kind of a private network. I hope I was able to answer this, Nikhil. It was a very, very good question.
All right, let's pause here for a bit and let's move to the next part because we're a little late on time right now. Over to you, Sagar. We'll keep on taking questions. Also, we'll share the link to our Slack channel, and we'll keep on whatever unanswered questions there are. We're always available on Slack, and our email IDs, which we'll share at the end of the call, and we'll keep answering those there.
Thanks, Aniket. Hello, everyone. Right. So we started with the problem statement of building a Clubhouse-like product. And then earlier in this session, we discussed the problem in depth. So it was mentioned about the scale, 100, 1,000, 100K, 10K users. Also in scale in terms of number of rooms, etc., etc. So, right, 10K rooms, 50K rooms. So this is the depth of the problem. Then we also understood about the architectural choices what we have. The choices with respect to protocol selection, TCP versus UDP, SFU versus peer-to-peer. Then we discussed about why RTMP is needed, why HLS dash, why CDN, how does Hotstar do it, how does Clubhouse might have to do. So we discussed about these. Now what I will do is I'll touch upon what all options do we have to build such an application. If you have to build a Clubhouse-like application, what are the options we have? Yeah. So of course, one of the choices is building it from scratch, building it using the bunch of open source components what we have, like Sarvesh told, right? We have On the SFU, we have N components. On the turn, we have N components. We have these components which we can use and build from scratch. What it means is you'll have to build SFU, a turn, the recording, compositor, RTMP out, etc., and then you'll have to also plug it in with your authentication, security, etc., mechanisms for it to be complete. This doesn't look like a small task. This building up such a product from scratch is a big task. We are talking about, like, say, 8 to 12 months of effort with an experienced team who understands what video is and how networking works. So it will still take about 8 to 12 months to get to this. So not everybody can afford 8 to 12 months to launch a product, right? So let's now see what if we can leverage existing service providers for this. Yep. So there are a bunch of CPaaS providers, as they call themselves, which can take care of the WebRTC part. So these providers could be, I'll touch upon them. Yeah. The problem is they'll only cover the WebRTC part. Now, what is this problem and what do they help? Let me just cover that. Right. This is modified, slightly modified, or slightly different looking diagram of what services is mentioned, where you have devices connecting to SFU, you have the signaling, you have turn, recording, RTMP, etc., etc. Now, CPaaS will primarily, most of them will cover the WebRTC part. So by CPaaS, I mean here services like Agora, Twilio, 100MS is one such, which will help you take care of packet to, let's say, the RTMP out. So this will help you. This will help you solve for the cases where you have, let's say, about 5,000 or 10,000 for the not so high listener capacity rooms, what Sitish mentioned in the, which was tending towards that red to green category. So for most use cases, when you're starting slow, maybe when you're launching a product, you don't expect in the first month itself you'll have rooms which will serve a lakh or 100,000 customers, right? 100,000 listeners. So this solution might very well work for people who are products which are starting slow. And this, what it helps here is, of course, it'll help you bring down the time to build an application significantly lower. You can get an application up and running in 1 to 2 months. You can have a product running in 1 to 2 months. That is what it does as compared to, let's say, building it from scratch using the open source components, because there you'll have to tie in a lot of things, a lot of engineering effort is required there. Now, let me discuss about the second half of the problem, right? Yeah. So when the size of the room goes beyond 5K, 10K, 100K, you will need to bring in this second half of the architecture. For this, you can leverage streaming providers, the live streaming providers, which take care of the HLS dash, the CDN part, and the players for consuming the content on client devices. Let me touch upon each of these. For example, say AWS Media Live, Wowza, Mux are some of the service providers you can use for converting the RTMP stream what you have to HLS and dash. This can do live transcoding. So this will solve one part of this problem. The second problem will need a CDN, because now the HLS dash traffic, as Shirish mentioned, runs on HTTP. The traditional CDNs will work now. So Amazon Cloudflare, Akamai, Fastly, all of these can provide, these can be a CDN service providers. And the CDN will take care of the last mile connectivity, taking it to 100K users and more. Then to complete this part, you will need the players on devices to consume this content. Again, a lot of open source components, open source projects available. For Android, we have Exo Player. For iOS, there is this AV Player, Web has Shaka, etc., etc. So there are these which will help you consume. So together, your streaming service providers, CDNs, and players can cover the second half of the architecture. The toughest part here will be, I think some of the questions, some of these was highlighted in the questions also, will be how do you manage these two services now? To handle the left side of the project, left side of the architecture, you have one CPaaS provider, the second you have a streaming service provider, managing between them. Let's say switching from one listener to another. For example, Sitish gave this example of inside auditorium and outside auditorium, right? let's say inside the auditorium is taken care by the CPaaS, outside the auditorium is taken care by the live streaming servers. This is very easy in a physical world. In a live streaming world, it is possible that some person who is outside the auditorium might want to speak, might want to ask, or might want to become a part of the panelist. That is when you have to move that listener from outside the auditorium to inside the auditorium. What it means here is you have to move him from a live streaming solution provider, let's say a media live, to inside your WebRTC, your CPaaS provider. That becomes a challenging thing. Not all products will have this requirement, but this is something which the developers will have to handle, right? Yeah. So concluding on these, after discuss about what are the options we have to build, let me conclude the problem statement, right? And how to build the Clubhouse in a very short summary. It is like, if let's say you want to start slow, or your product itself, the size of the audience per room is expected to be small, less than 5K, 10K, then one option, of course, is you build it in-house, use open source components. There are a bunch of open source components. We use Pion. Pion is very configurable, has helped us develop our product quickly. Similarly, there are others too, right? The engineering effort wise, we're talking about 8 to 12 months with a good team. Then option 2 is get a head start, use some of these CPaaS service providers, Agora, Twilio, 100ms, which can significantly bring down the go-to-market time, and you can go live in, let's say, 1 or 2 months. And let's say if from day one your use cases are having large audience, or 6 months into the product you want to reach an audience which per room can be more than 10K, then you will have to bring in combinations of these. You'll have to have the WebRTC CPaaS, streaming service providers, and then players. We are looking like a 3 to 4 month development cycle here. So this in some sense summarizes this whole seminar or webinar what we had, where we discuss the problem, we discuss the architecture options, and then we have a choices what a developer can use, a product manager can use to go live. This is all I had, and over to Aniket for the questions.
All right, thanks, Sagar. So a couple of announcements, because it looks like, I think there are two kinds of people in the audience. So there's a bunch of people who really clearly want to sort of get into the nitty-gritties of WebRTC and want to get on some answers. We'll share a link to our own 100ms. I mean, you can call it an after webinar, after party, where you can all join at the end of this call, and we can sort of have a more informal conversations about, some of the more advanced topics, or even if you guys think some of the questions weren't answered, just join there. We'll try and answer some of the final questions from the session so far. Kshitij, if you're around, yeah. Kshitij, I think it'll be interesting to take this one question which two people have asked. Harsha and Vishal also asked this at the beginning. It's a very interesting question, which is, how do you handle 100 speakers, or how do you handle, let's say, several people with audio and video on? How should we handle that? I mean, is it on the application level? Is it on the networking level? If we are using PaaS providers, how do you handle that, etc., etc.?
Yeah. So hundreds of speakers, right? Let me just wrap my head around this, right? If you have hundreds of speakers, then let's ignore the listeners for a bit, right? If you have hundreds of speakers, every speaker is receiving 99 streams, right? Because it is receiving the audio of other 99 people. 99 in audio, I mean, still possible. If you're talking about 99 audio and video, then all of them cannot be seen at the same time, right? So usually the way it is done is, you can have hundreds of speakers together, but at a given time, due to the physics of how we talk, all 100 are not kind of talking at the same time. Out of the 100, at a given time, maybe 3, 4 are talking, right? Otherwise it becomes a fish market, right? So what you do is you basically keep transmitting the audio of all the 100 speakers to each other, but the video is transmitted only for a select people who were actually talking at that time, or maybe some kind of a LRU algorithm can be used. Now, this is a very, I'll tell you, I mean, I saw the question, by the way, that how do you deal with this in Twilio and Agora? I mean, I don't want to do a sales pitch here, but this is exactly what we are building at 100ms, guys. Right? Agora and Twilio does not solve it. Zoom solves it. If you notice on Zoom and Google Meet, these guys solve it because, and they sell it as a product. But the API companies are not solving this problem. What API companies are giving is just pipes that you connect the pipes. But when the pipes kind of get to the limits of those problems, that okay, how do I even download 100 video connections? Because even if I'm downloading a small thumbnail video, it's at least 100 kilobytes per second, and 100 and 200 kilobytes per second is like it's 10 Mbps, right? Not everybody has 10 Mbps speed. So then you have to carefully select, okay, who do you want to subscribe to? Only the active speakers. Okay, so then you have to write a lot of code, and this is where, I mean, this is where 100ms excels. I'll stop here.
All right. Sorry for the wrong Slack link in the channel, guys. We'll be fixing that. Just hang around for maybe a couple of minutes till we fix that link. Another question that also comes up is asked by Sandhyo. I'm presuming that's Sandeep. But how do you support the situation where bandwidth or network quality is changing? The SDK end user will need the ability to switch the stream to higher or low quality. How do you handle that?
So I'm reiterating the question. How do you handle the situations when the network condition is choppy and going up and down? So Sandy, I think the answer is very similar to what I gave to the previous question. That again, the Twilio and Agoras of the world, leave it to the application developer to handle it. And the way to handle it is that, let me take an example. Actually, it'll become very easy if I take an example. Let's say there are 10 people in the room, and imagine everybody is sending their video at 500 kilobits per second. So 10 people into 500 is like 5 megabits per second. But let's say you do not have 5 megabits per second for one particular user. You have only 1 megabits per second. So if you have 1 megabits per second, that means you can only download 2 videos. So then you, in the application logic, will have to decide which 2, right? And then you have to figure out, okay, I'll take the 2 who have been active speaker or something like that. So that is how you handle it, right? And beyond a certain point, you say, okay, I will turn off all the videos. I'll just keep the audio on. So that is one. Aniket, does it make sense? Do you want to add something here?
No, I think this is the right time because we haven't done enough of it, and I won't be doing my job if I don't do it. Look, guys, hang around. We are still answering questions. Arpit, if you're around, if you can just share a link of the 100ms link that we can everybody can attend. All right, the right Slack link is up. For all the advanced follow-up questions, I'm just trying to summarize. So there's a bunch of advanced questions which we deliberately didn't go into today, but these are wonderful indicators for us. We'll try and answer those advanced questions. I think a cascading SFU latency between distributed SFU systems, these are all that we are deliberately sort of avoiding today. We can always take them in the next session. And how do you handle sort of large number of speakers? How do you handle network degradations? We can do another talk on just those specific topics if you guys want. But this has been wonderful feedback to get that. One very coming back to my job, what 100ms, what we are trying to do at 100ms is effectively trying to simplify a lot of these advanced edge cases that exactly Sandeep, Harsha, Vishal, you guys are asking about. So a lot of the things that we do under the hood is we are building this system where we automatically switch from a WebRTC to HLS system, which should be released in Q4, where you don't have to switch between 2 different vendors. For network degradation, there's as Kshitij said, I mean, he gave you the theoretical answer. For you to be able to do this, you will be able to do this with traditional WebRTC PaaS providers. But we have done a lot of hard work over the past 8 months, simplifying our interfaces without losing any flexibility, wherein this will be handled internally by the SDK. So we'll always know who is the right person and what's the right stream and track to prioritize when network bandwidth goes low. Similarly, the question around what do you do with 100 speakers? How do you sort of, which is a bunch of smart application level fixes with sort of 100 viewers, etc., where you don't subscribe, don't publish a bunch of videos, bunch of audios. All of this is done by our SDK, by our UI component library. All of this is currently in beta. If you guys want access, We are currently still in beta, which is, I mean, you guys can access it by signing up on our dashboards on 100ms. The documentations are live. You can look at it. Please do share your feedback, join the Slack channel. Would love to explore what you guys are building and reach out to all of you specifically and explain to you how we'll save you time on how the 100ms is simpler or better than other WebRTC interfaces.